The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
At first, we hit your gadgets with our state-of-the-art digitalized mobile studio with the debate on the road behind the wheels. Later, we launched our magnificent studios located on Plot 1A, Sewagude Close, Lukulinanganda, Machindye, Kampala, where we bring to you our must-watch shows like The Mighty Drive, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m., Hotline, Mondays, 7 p.m. As for legal matters, Twins at Bar, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Wednesdays, 6 p.m. is Afro-Caribbean Link, where we connect Africa with the Caribbean. Voltage on Thursdays, 7 p.m., featuring a youthful panel. Interface with Dr. Kiza Besije every Friday, 12 p.m. with his call to action against injustices. Snap Talk, Saturdays, 6 p.m. with the trio. A must-watch, The Political Dice, Sundays, 8 p.m. with the duo that never stammers, and so much more. Watch us live on all our social media platforms. We are The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Good evening, Uganda. I welcome you to this exciting episode of the Hotline Show. My name is Edgar Matthew Karuhanga on this 18th day of November 2024. A couple of years ago, to be specific, 4, many Ugandans lost their lives at a time such as this one on the 18th and 19th, 2020. Ugandans were shot in cold blood. Some, according to the police and of course to the government, they were affected by stray bullets and they were killed by stray bullets. But many of these people who lost their lives continue to seek for justice. Many were just women hawking food. Others were children, young boys being sent to the shop. And of course, many were gunned down at their work premises. Up to today, 4 years down the road, the country has not received justice for those people. Nobody has been booked and is on record to have been remanded over this particular issue. The BBC investigated a piece on what happened in that time, and many people, a couple of numbers, a couple of cars and vans were showed to Ugandans of the perpetrators of these particular extrajudicial killings. But up to today, nothing has been said to that. As the National Unity Platform, they continue to celebrate and commemorate those souls that they lost, and I saw a couple of members lighting up candles to remember the people that lost their lives in this particular time. So we join them today to just put a word to it and remind the people who are concerned that these people still need justice, and they are Ugandans, so they are entitled to this. But this week, a lot of things have been happening. Kisoro district has a new woman member of parliament, and of course, in that particular election cycle, we saw the NRM literally taking the lead, or what you can say, taking a landslide victory, because both their candidates, if you can look at it in that way, were the two best. One was the independent, but leaning on the side of NRM, and the second was the NRM National Resistance Movement. A total of over 90,000 votes. When you juxtapose with the opposition or other political parties, you realize that they were really, really beaten down, hands down. Is this the reality of the national outlook of Uganda? NRM keeps telling people that, yes, they're the leaders, they have various leaders on every parish, every village. Does this confirm what they say? And do we really have to put some loopholes into the issue of opposition saying that every time they are rigged in various elections? And what happened earlier on the National Unity Platform before 2021, they were sweeping literally all the by-elections in the country. After 2021, there has not been any by-election that has been won by the National Unity Platform itself. What does this mean to the politics of the country today? And in new news that we received today, the Minister for Finance, Matia Kasaija, has issued out a document that is confirming that loans or loaning companies are not allowed to have an interest of more than 2.8% per month on any money that they give out or any loan that is awarded to Ugandans. Annually, this interest rate should not go above 33.6%. What does this mean to banks, but also to these loaning companies? This is where they are getting their source of livelihood. And the question of a free market economy, why is it that we are monitoring the interest rates that are given by these loaning companies? Earlier on, another law was put up that you're not allowed to confiscate an ID of a citizen because you have a loan or they incurred a loan from you. Well, how does this play out? And also, you have news of the shrinking space of non-government organizations. As we speak today, we don't even have more than 5,000 NGOs in Uganda. By 2019, we had over 14,000 non-government organizations. What happened to these entities? And of course, how best can we rejuvenate the NGO world? We have that and much more in this edition of the Hotline Show. What you can do is join the conversation tonight at the Alternative Uganda, but also at the Mighty Drive Show, at the Hotline Show, that is the hashtag, but also at Digitalk TV, that is on Facebook, on X, and on YouTube. As every Monday, I'm privileged to be joined by two gentlemen, one from the National Resistance Movement, the other from Uganda People's Congress. I'll start with you, Honorable Retired Major, Senior Counsel, Paula Awich, Ambassador, that's also your title, to mention but a few. You're most welcome, sir, and it's a privilege to have you tonight.
Thank you so much, and greeting to our viewers.
Great. Honorable Joseph Ochieno from the Uganda People's Congress, you're most welcome, sir, and it's always an honor to have you right here.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I noticed that you are raising many important headline points, and yet you invited us to talk about a specific topic. But I hope we have the opportunity to discuss some of those things, including things to do with interest rates, something that is very close to my heart, and I've been campaigning about it for the last, really, nearly 20 years.
Wow, that's good. Thank you so much, sir. I'm going to start off with you, sir, to just tell us how your week is and what is happening in the National Resistance Movement, and how are you enjoying the results of Kisoro? Just a brief insight on what is happening in your life and at the center.
Well, my life and the life of the party is smooth. As I like saying, no news is good news, because if there was bad news, it would have covered everything.
Yes, sir.
These days I see even Monitor newspaper trying to create
News.
research things, not news, because news is not there. They create research, documentary kind of. But to say this has happened, the news that you report is not there. Because many news that are reported are bad ones anyway. So now you can see the editorial policy of the Monitor is that they write on documentaries.
You have to agree
like
with
today,
your,
what
with
was
your
the headline
chairman.
today?
Was it about NGOs or something like that?
Yes, you see those are research. Those are
But it makes news that the NGOs are shrinking. Like
yeah,
that.
but it's not the news scandals type.
Yeah, that's
Now, my week was smooth, as I said. We had election in Kisoro, which we lost to an independent, though NRM leaning. We also had an interruption because the president was in the east explaining many things pertaining to manifesto promise. And then he had to take off time to run to Kisoro. We also started Manifesto Week. Research is proving that we have finished 80%. We have managed to achieve 84%. And yet we are left with only 1 year. So we do believe that the other 16% of what we promised the people, we would finish it.
Wow,
Apart from
84%.
that, really normal routine challenges, and just hope that the week goes like that we till the end of the year, because normally end of the year is challenging with accidents, death, and all that. Of course, I've continued to lose relatives, but that is at an individual level.
Okay.
So we keep on. Life is like that.
All is well. That's good. Let me come to you, Honorable Joseph. How is UPC and how are you as a person?
I'm very well as a person. Frustrated though that some of the works that I've been trying to do in the last 20 or so years is not gaining pace as much as I would like to see. But I get relieved that somebody like Kasaija, with whom we met at a television program, UBC actually, about 15 years ago, interestingly, and I need to look for that clip, when he was, I think, Minister of Trade, State for Trade, something like that. He was still a junior minister. And so it was him, it was the managing director of the Kenya Commercial Bank, and myself.
Yes, sir.
And in that panel, I was quarreling about the price of money, amongst other things, infrastructure, education, and the price of money. Education, turns out that in that UPC program, I think, is it called Ground Zero? It's a program that used to feature on Saturdays. They film it, it's live, and then they do it on television Sunday. That's the time. So I've not been invited to it but recently. But so they had economics class of Kibuli Secondary School in the audience, and their teacher, if I can remember. And so while quarreling about interest rates in Uganda and the exploitative nature of the whole thing, and the exploitative nature of banks, and lamenting the sale and destruction of the banking system by his regime at the time, particularly including the sale of Uganda Commercial Bank, Kasaija retorted very, very angrily, and they started talking about what UPC did in the 80s. And I remember the economics teacher from Kibuli was saying that, look, this gentleman is talking about facts and is raising current contemporary issues, and where you're taking us back to whatever happened in 1980, whether it was right or wrong. So it's interesting that now he is the Minister of Finance and is able to raise these things about rates. But Edgar,
Yes, sir.
low interest rates is not a bad thing, but you're right that we are operating in a global environment in which things like interest rates are liberalized. However, it's the role of government, including the most capitalist governments in the world, like America, to intervene on behalf of the citizens. That's why governments exist. So, when you leave the market to its own vices, then the 1% are going to eat up the remaining 99%. So it's actually not wrong, and it's actually the right thing for government to say there must be a cap, a ceiling to protect the citizenry, to protect the consumers. And in any case, that process in itself helps regulate the market.
The question is, are we in this particular instance protecting the Ugandans themselves?
You will be protecting.
Or are we trying to monopolize?
No. You'll be protecting the consumer from the exploitation of the rich, powerful, and the exploitative market. In this case, whether it's Museveni's family involved in these businesses or not, or MTN, whoever is involved. And why I'm talking about farms, because some of the things will have interest, which is basically one of the things we're trying to say.
Exactly.
But it does not matter. The issue then is not the people who are being protected, the people who are basically losing out, but rather the ordinary citizens. But in any case, it will also be very interesting, which isn't it, that actually, apparently, legislators, one of the most common things is that parliamentarians have fallen prey, not only one, to loan sharks, but two, have been substantially impoverished because of these exorbitant interest rates in the street. So it may not necessarily be the case that they're thinking about the average consumer. They may even be thinking about themselves. But whatever the case, I do not think it's actually a bad, in principle, a bad approach.
Let me come to Honorable, which especially on that particular issue. Sir, he has said that this is something good and we are protecting our people who have been exploited. And these things have been said, that you have loan personnel putting interest rate to as much as 40%, some even 60, shamelessly. And it's a good initiative. But do you think government has introspected also on the side of these loaning companies themselves? What do you think about that, sir?
I think, like my friend says, I concur with him. What is the state for? There's a social contract between the people, among the people, to give their power to the state. And that is why they said the power that even public officers hold, hold on behalf of the people. And further, I can still demonstrate. That is why if you are holding an office like Chief Administrative Officer, and you decide, say, to dismiss a headmistress of a primary school arbitrarily without using the law, there's a procedure called judicial review. Judicial review is to review that power you are holding is not yours. It is for the people. Exercise it judiciously. Therefore, that power which is given to the state is to protect the people. You don't just live like a national park. And so the people deserve to be protected by the intervention of the state. And in this case, that is why, for example, the state has Bank of Uganda. Bank of Uganda is the overall supervisor, is the overall control. That power Bank of Uganda has is from the people. And if anybody in Bank of Uganda uses it badly, you can be subjected to a judicial review. Now, it is therefore proper to protect people. Otherwise, it will be total anarchy. Now,
is it anarchy an overstatement?
Yes, because he says 1% will eat the rest. Is that 1% eating 99%, even worse than mine? Total.
But when we look at the income inequalities today, so, as we speak, sir.
Now,
no, let me just finish this point, sir, because when you talk about that issue, it reminds me of the income inequality that we have in this country, where if people are supposed to eat each other, they should be eating. You have a person who can come and have a meal that is paying the monthly wage of this servant that is serving them. And this is open knowledge in this country, sir. And yet we have Ugandans who live on less than $1 a day, and many of the Ugandans live on less than $1 a day.
Okay, you have finished your point.
Yes, sir.
But I was still saying protection of people is a duty of the state. And, you know, loan can be a big problem.
Yes, sir.
And it would be very dangerous for NRM as a party not to protect people. When the people also sign a social contract that we give you mandate of 5 years. You see, Edgar,
yes, sir.
Part of the thinking why they said Hitler killed the Jews, the 5 million that is alluded to in the Holocaust, is that somehow in Europe, and particularly in Germany, they found that the Jews who were foreigners were the loan givers.
Yes.
Everybody was tied to their loan.
Yes.
And they said, hey, come on, how? Where did they get the money? And it became a big issue. So as NRM, it is good that Matia Kasaija has come in. For example, last week, is it the other week, we had a kind of, we could call it a mini demonstration by NRM flag bearers in Wakiso. They came to the party secretariat saying they stood for NRM, they lost the election, they lost their property and this and that. So they wanted to meet the national chairman. But what intrigued me, which I did not take it lying, is that the language they were using in relation to loan was sectarian. And if that language, if we don't tame it, if it is indeed true that such people are giving out loan that way, and we don't tame it, then it is a language that almost has the potentiality of a genocide. For example, and they use the word 3 or 4, 5 times, that those who are giving loan, who have tied us, are long-nosed. That is, so meaning that there's a sector of particular tribes or particular people who are giving loan.
The same thing that was in the Jews and the Holocaust.
Yes. So I therefore find that if we can see even our community using bitter language on loan givers, then the earlier we protect, the better. But economics, as you say, the laissez-free, the Adam Smith kind of economic, where you said it is market forces to determine demand and supply. Therefore, if people are demanding for the loan and then you increase the price, it will not work in that in economic sense in the financial sector. And that is why Bank of Uganda is there to do that role.
Don't you think there is need for a consensus with these borrowers first before we make such drastic measures? Because they feel good for the people themselves, but this person is incurring a risk, sir, of giving you their money. So how do you protect? Don't you think there is need for a consensus to talk between them? And
one thing is, these cries have been for a long time. It's not that 1, 2, 3 people have cried about the exploitative loaning and then government came up. The cries is long overdue.
Okay.
On the other hand, I know approaches and attempted solution from the capital owners, the money, also for a long period of time. So it is not true that it has come all of a sudden, wham, today. This crisis is long overdue. And also government is alive to the fact that, remember, some of these banks also get loans. And government is alive to the fact of their source of borrowing.
Yeah.
So meaning that the research proves that their source of borrowing is not as draconian. If that was the case, then it would be directly saying we close you. For example, Stanbic Bank. You would in other words, because Standing Bank cannot get at a higher rate and gives it at a lower rate. It would be killing them. So I do believe that Bank of Uganda and government, to take this step, they have done due diligence. I don't think it's just a jumping up from nowhere. Okay. Therefore, you are thinking that you should talk with those who own the money, or even talk with those who are borrowing the money. For on the side of those who are borrowing the money, it's a long due crisis. If anything, we should have done this thing 10 years ago.
Okay.
But for those who are having the money, I also believe that government is alive to the specific professionals in the Bank of Uganda that, look, if you are a Stanbic Bank, where you are getting that money, you are not getting it at this rate. Or even better scientific economic arguments that justify that if you give it at this rate, you will not die. Your business will not collapse. That one government must be alive to it.
Right.
So therefore, in the political terms for us NRM, it would be very risky, especially in the central, with the language that I had being used openly. Openly, they were describing the type of people, the particular type of community or the particular type of ethnicity that is giving money, and then they are taking their property.
If that's the reality, that's the ethnicity that is giving out money.
So therefore,
won't change it.
We need, a law or a policy comes to address a mischief.
Yes.
So if that mischief is identified, then it should be addressed.
Okay.
If the mischief is the people who are over borrowing, giving at that high rate, that mischief must be addressed.
I see the Honorable Ocheno has something to say, but before you add, you can add on. Now it looks like the only alternative remaining are the banks, right? And these loan agents can decide to go and fix their money in a bank at a fixed interest rate, and they will get their money that is even more than what they would have got from these particular interests they're getting from the people, what is mandated to them by government. So aren't we leaving our people in air, for lack of a better word, because the banks and the things that they need in order for you to give you money and interests in terms of collateral and things like that. That's why many of the Ugandans have been opting for these loan, what they call loan sharks, because it's easy for them to access the money with not a lot of risks involved or formality involved. So what next for that Ugandan who has been relying mostly on these people for that fund?
I've seen my internet is struggling, so maybe you'll have to help me.
Yes,
but I think there are two things. One is that I think to suggest that you want to get the people whom Comrade Abish and I are suggesting ought to be protected, meaning the ordinary consumers, to have a mini conversation with them about the fact that they're being bashed and they've been crying for the last 20 years. At least I've been on this personally for the last 20 years. I think it's to misunderstand, to misunderstand the point at which you're saying the role of government. Government is the regulator, is the enabler. My view is that government, it was long overdue. But it's interesting the point Comrade Which is making, which links up to my cries from members of parliament, that then I hope Comrade Which is not the case that many of these things is a response to the experiences you had from your members in central Uganda who believe that only a certain section of the population are the money lenders. My campaign has been, interestingly, about money lenders in principle. And Edgar, it has also been including banks. I suggested Comrade Rich in that event that interest rates were too high. And at the time, I castigated government for selling off Uganda Commercial Bank and making now Kenya Commercial Bank coming to make profit on our people. I suggested, as Comrade Rich was saying, that governments borrow money at international markets, in many cases sometimes from as low as 0%. In many cases, possibly not more than 1.5%. And by the time these monies enter our central banks, it would possibly not be 3%, for argument's sake. At what stage does money, leave the central bank at 2-3%? Reach commercial banks
At 18%.
at 5, 6, 7, 8%, for argument's sake.
Today it's
And then these monies go into the pockets of Stanbic, or even our local indigenous religious bank, is it called Centenary?
Centenary Bank.
For argument's sake, at 8%. Where really is the justification that at the end of the day, my fantastic, beautiful Mbeja here should go ahead and borrow that money at 18%? Quite frankly, what is the explanation?
Okay.
Now, how can that happen? From a commercial bank, and there's a government looking, and in any case, that government is supposed to be the enabler. That has been the argument.
Okay.
Now, if it's the case then that you're making, that part of the challenge is that, okay, these lenders will run away, I don't think they should be running away. And if they're running away, that means they're actually sharks. But if it is really a proper business that recognizes that I'm going to set up a money transaction agency in Nansana, and I know that I'll be borrowing money from maybe my local commercial bank or from my friends, which is an etal, and I'm going to be paying back a particular amount of money, and in order for me to make money out of this, I add 2, 3, 4% profit.
Okay.
I mean percentage, and then I get the profit.
Yes, sir.
If people think that instead of making 2-3% percentage interest is wrong, but they want to make 18, those are not normal businesses.
Maybe it's the risk of 18 is maybe better than the one of 3%.
No, in terms of risk, and that's why government, and I really hope, Comrade Rich, that if it's something that has come from Kasaija, and tell him, because I remember this myself, having a very big bat with him. Yes, if that's the case and they're doing it as government, I hope they're not doing it because of a response from a particular community, that they're doing generally nationally. One, so therefore from these lenders, and then two, taking you as a consumer into account. And then three, of course, taking average ordinary commercial banks in place, meaning therefore that the government should also make sure that they review the provisions, the requirements that banks want in order for them to go ahead and access credit, especially when Mr. Museveni is going around using my fuel, to sell the idea of money economy. So it would be a contradiction. So in any case, we're just advising them that it's actually in their best interest to regulate this thing properly and make sure that the spread and it's fair for everybody.
Thank you so much. 39 minutes past 7 p.m. You're still watching the Hotline Show I'm still with Mr. Joseph Ochieno from UPC and retired Major Paula Awich from the National Resistance Movement. He's the Director of the External Affairs at that particular entity. We're going to come to this conversation of the organizations or non-government organizations reducing in number. But before you even delve into that conversation, you reminded me when you talk about the genuinity. And I hope it's genuine because when you look at the patterns today, we're entering an election cycle. When we say that we are trying to protect our people, what about the minimum wage bill? Why is it still a bill? Why is it not yet an act? So are we really, really wanting to do it for the Ugandans there? And that's a question that all of us can introspect about. I'm going to start with you, sir, on this particular issue of the NGOs. In 2019, non-government organizations were more than 14,000 in this country. As we speak today, according to the NGO Bureau, they are not more than 5,000. And yes, there are some issues that have been happening globally, like, change or interest, investment interests by funders and partners. But why is it going down to such a level? Now people are unemployed, people are looking for alternative sources of income. Sir, what do you think about, or what don't we see in these non-government organizations shrinking by the day?
I think the people who are smiling are NRM, possibly NRM secretary, but certainly NRM chairman is smiling because they consider civil society organizations, especially civil society organizations that are supported and financed by donors abroad as a nuisance because they're independent, because they offer alternative voices to the citizenry. So they're really the beneficiaries of this. But number two, the clampdown that these guys subjected civil society organizations, particularly the big donors like GIZ and ATAL. This is basically the outcome 2-3 years late down the road, and I think it may possibly get worse. But then number three, I think also that Uganda got a fairly bad hit in terms of global headlines. Many of the numbers in terms of the NGOs in Uganda would not necessarily be the sophisticated strategic Ford foundations, Clinton foundations, the Obama foundations, or the Milton Obote foundations of Europe kind of stuff here, the Frederick Edner foundations, like whatever. Many of these NGOs would be actually a few people who hit 70, they realize they've got $2 million in their household, for some of this Bazungu, and they don't have possibly children, or they have children who are doing well. They're committed to the environment, they're committed to girl child education, they're committed to poverty elevation. Some of these in Europe and North America tend to be very ideologically driven. Some of them will be, but in America they'll be possibly very Christian fundamentalist people. So they want to support particular churches in the promotion of their faith groups. And those who come through the churches then say, how do we do it? Then out of a church, maybe let's start up a mini school, things like that. So these individuals who do that. But in the last year or two, so Uganda has had such a bad press, particularly around the legislations of anti-homosexuality. Now, that's not a contradiction. On the one hand, but Uganda basically got a bad press. The issue was not only homosexuality, and I think we discussed it here. It was simply that it's a huge human rights abuse, including the kind of thing that you yourself talked about. From elections, violence, to the killings, to the disappearances, to the fact that even today, we still have many young Ugandans who are unaccounted for following the extremely violent elections 4 years ago, which was possibly the most violent. But
I was thinking that is a good ground for investment, lack of a better word, from these foreign donors, because they like to invest in such an ecosystem.
No. I'm saying that the mainstream NGOs would have certain positions, meaning they do carry out interventionist investments. Exactly. But some of these, as I said, many of these NGOs are not the big ones. Many of these they'll be registered as NGOs, but they'll be organizations supported by individuals in Europe and North America. That's what I'm trying to say. And for an average American, $1 or $2 million is not a lot. It's not a lot of money, and they're prepared to spend that. And $1 million will make a difference to the livelihood of an organization in Soroti.
Okay.
You know, so that is that. But then, as I said, once we got the bad press, you know, these individuals went on to switch off from Uganda. In other words, Uganda became a very hostile environment, too hostile for them to formally operate. So in any case, if the big funders like the Ford Foundations, et al., had problems, you know, the civil society organizations like OSIWA and others had big challenges here. What about an organization headed and supported by one or two individuals, perhaps a group of churches in America or in Europe? But that said, actually...
Okay, let's first start from there,
No,
sir.
no. I need to make this.
Okay.
That said, this number of civil society organizations in a country, you know, in countries where there is democracy, in countries where there is rule of law, in countries where governments provide for education, quality education for their children, quality health care for their children, protect the environment for themselves, there's no need for civil society organizations to exist. But I'm not saying that the reduction in the civil society organizations, his smiling was beginning to get very relieved.
Let's start from there.
I'm not saying that's the point. Not at all. I'm saying
No, because I think that's...
no, this is not a
that's
concept.
also a point.
I'm giving you a deep intellectual observation. NRA cannot pick it because it's not the point.
Let's start from there, sir. Let me bring you the NRM guru. Does it worry you in any way that in 2019, around 5 years ago, these organizations were more than 14,000, and now they are less by 9,000 in a space of 5 years? What do you think about that particular discovery?
It doesn't worry me. It doesn't worry me because
Yes, sir.
what is NGO? NGO is non-governmental organization. Why do we have non-governmental organization? Non-governmental organization come to fill a void. They come to fill a gap.
Yes, sir.
Now, to show you that I concur with my Congress brother,
Yes, sir.
is that I even put it point number 2. And then the other 2 more points behind. So if I'd put it the last one, you'd say, I just heard it from him.
Yeah.
So NGO come to fill a void. And where there's no void, then they have nothing to fill. So it's nearly what I was saying, no news is good news. So where there's no void, where there's no gap, you will have reduced NGOs. Now, first of all, I have had the benefit, having worked in UN, I've had the benefit to know many issues that happen in nearly all the 193 countries in the world. Because I worked in an organization in UN where I have met all the 193 countries. Now, a country like Ethiopia, for example, you can't compare the civil society atmosphere in Ethiopia like with Uganda.
How so?
Do you know that there was a time when the NGO in Ethiopia were operating from Nairobi? They ran away from Ethiopia. They're doing work but based in Nairobi. They had this situation where they're so strict that if you're an NGO going to Gulu, your fuel would be regulated by government to calculate for you how many liters you need to go to Gulu and back. And you will be authorized to get just that and go to Gulu and back. Even your own resources was controlled. So when you see the way we have civil society here, man, celebrate. Other countries are worse.
That's because when you look here in the country, many of these NGOs have been, having a lot of dubious issues, stealing or robbing, accounting for money that they have not actually used. So to some extent, you are right, sir.
Now, part of the void that I was talking about, in the absence of war or during war, is when you see a lot of NGO. And part of the influx that you were saying was a result of the war. And that is why even part of the country which was not having war had less NGOs. Gulu, for example, Gulu had such big numbers of NGOs to the extent that there was some makeshift kind of bar which really careless kind of bar with nearly all the boys who were serving there with the Rastafarian kind of hair. Do you know that all the boys married whites?
Rastas.
All the boys in Gulu married whites because the NGOs was really so much, and the NGOs actors were white ladies. So all that the boys you have to do in Gulu was to just braid your hair a bit, and then cut your jeans, cut off the shoulders, the sleeves, cut it, and then start serving tea in that bar. They all married whites. And for some reason, our colleagues in the West tend to invest even in their civil society organization where you would say bad news. I took a German friend who had come to Garden City and we wanted to have coffee. She's a lady. The lady was so annoyed why I took her to Garden City. Now we went to this slum below Katanga. And there was this person selling fish with a lot of flies. The girl was very happy. Very, very happy. And yet she almost cried for me for taking her to Garden City. So this is the mindset of where NGOs work.
This gentleman is saying that it's bad press. It's for the bad manners of this government that NGOs are no longer operating.
I'm telling you why. So even practically,
but there's evidence to defend
even in Uganda, at the time when there were many NGOs, the 19,000 or so you are quoting,
14,000.
the 14,000, they were nearly in war areas. Maybe 80% was in war areas, and the other peaceful areas had no NGOs. Therefore, logically, when war closes, then NGO drops. The other thing is that we should know that the legislative process of amending the NGO Act was very consultative. The draft was made by NGOs themselves. Then it was consulted by government. Even after the draftsman or draftswoman in Attorney General chambers came up with it into a law form, it was finally discussed. Of course, the law cannot come in a way that pleases everybody. But I can assure you, the legislation of the amendment of NGO Act, it was very consultative, involving NGOs. And therefore, we wouldn't now be crying about the crackdown on NGO. The other aspect I want to share with you is that globally there has been donor challenge, donor fatigue. So donor fatigue in as far as the fact that there was a time during Corona and even before, the global economy tended to have a kind of a recession.
Around 2008.
Yes, so when this recession came, NGO donors were affected and the NGOs were affected. And since then, donors have not recovered from putting in a lot of money in NGOs. Some came back, some did not, including funding to United Nations. Organizations like UNICEF were affected. So let us also factor in the donor fatigue. That is. So all these factors affected the NGO.
That is also true, they did. But there is also, Mr. Museveni has called these, especially the opposition, that they have been funded by foreign agents, foreign donors. And he has always been skeptical, which even led to a closure of some of these organizations. You remember DGF and the rest. So to what extent can't we say that Mr. Museveni also does not, and government generally does not have the heart for these particular entities?
Of course they don't.
No, not that. It is maybe just one factor affecting the NGO, not that there's bad faith. Because I know for a fact that organizations that were intercepted or got by government, there was empirical data which were by Financial Intelligence Authority, which is a body established by an act of parliament, and even ordinary intelligence system, which found that they were really funding social riot. To that effect, that was true. So those who were affected, definitely as a state, you have to get, once you identify that, you know it is a mischief, and as a state, you have to come in. Some states come in a very draconian way, but at least in Uganda, we tend to get said, okay, we shall cool you down. I can assure you, if you were in a country like Ethiopia, you'd get yourself into big problems. Ethiopia, it reached a point where NGOs moved to Nairobi. Ethiopia, your own fuel government would give you the amount of liters you are supposed to use. I can still tell you, Edgar, that the liberal attitude, the freedom we have in Uganda is exercised even in the civil society. The ones which were got off were really victims. Right?
Are you seeing Mr. Cheno's head? He's nodding.
One of the things I really don't like is comparing Uganda with any other country, especially when it's in the negative. Because Comrade Rich is a lawyer, human rights are fundamental and basics, you know. Look, if Ethiopia is mistreating its citizens, to say that, well, we are mistreating you, but not as bad as Ethiopia, you're one lawyer here. If whatever is happening in Uganda, in Rwanda, some of them are not happening here, we can't use that. I, as someone who's campaigned around and for this country, and in the name of this country, and this is my only country, I'm not interested in what happens anywhere else badly. All I just want to say is that, well, I reject the idea that anything bad should happen around me, and that should include the question of NGOs. But yes, the clampdown on NGOs in this country, including the attack on these very same spaces of where we are, communication on television, I'm sure you know the stories, you know, where many young people on these programs, including some of our junior producers, spend a horrific amount of time in prison. Now, in prison and detention and unfairly. Those are things that should not happen again. Now, some of those things affected and contributed to some of our friends abroad from reviewing some of their positions in terms of where and how they could support us. Now, some of the people who would support people like him, these are basically global organizations whose interest is to see that maybe the media globally is advanced, young people who want to go into training in media and technology, in particular Africa, are supported. Some of these will normally be philanthropists who are basically individuals in some of these places. And so it does not necessarily have to be anything to do with war, nor does it necessarily have to be anything to do with politics. But you're absolutely right that, of course, when this war, and in Uganda's case, when the NRA war was in northern Uganda and northern eastern Uganda, it was a terrible thing. And indeed, by the way, had it not been NGOs, would have lost a lot more Ugandans. In fact, to the extent that even now, aspects of northern and part of eastern economy, but particularly northern economy, is really existing for no other reason but because NGOs and global NGOs came in to get involved and to participate. But I just hope that, a final thing, sorry, which I thought was also that the clampdown by the NGO Bureau, some people believe that NGO Bureau became a very political thing, that some of the leaders of the NGO Bureau, dare say on television deliberately, were highly politicized, and some of them were behaving as if they're like a branch and an extension of NRA cadreship, part of the community, which is offices in Chad on the road. And so some NGOs, some local NGOs by the community, which genuinely, because I know a few people who basically simply say, let's pack our bags and forget about some of these things, and let's look for jobs, and even if there are no jobs, let's go ahead and begin to look after chicken rather than being treated like basically thieves and criminals in our own country.
Okay, thank you so much. It's now time we take a break. You're still watching the Hotline Show, and when we come back, we delve into the conversation of what is happening in Kisoro. But before we even do that, we shall want to find solutions to these particular issues. Is there a way we can foster an environment that is going to bring back more non-government organizations? And of course, how do we empower our NGOs here in the country to be able to make money from their own ventures, rather than always looking at foreign aid and donors to support our cause? That and much more is what you're going to be expecting in the second hour of the Hotline Show. My name is Edgar Matthew Karohanga. Let's take a break now.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
At first, we hit your gadgets with our state-of-the-art digitalized mobile studio with the debate on the road behind the wheels. Later, we launched our magnificent studios located on Plot 1A, Sewagude Close, Lukulinanganda, Machinde, Kampala, where we bring to you our must-watch shows like The Mighty Drive, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m., Hotline, Mondays, 7 p.m. As for legal matters, Twins at Bar, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Wednesdays, 6 p.m. is Afro-Caribbean Link, where we connect Africa with the Caribbean. Voltage on Thursdays, 7 p.m., featuring a youthful panel. Interface with Dr. Kiza Besige every Friday, 12 p.m. with his call to action against injustices. Snap Talk, Saturdays, 6 p.m. with the trio. A must-watch, The Political Dice, Sundays, 8 p.m. with the duo that never stammers, and so much more. Watch us live on all our social media platforms. We are the Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.